So, as promised in the feedback that I gave to many of you on the Unit 1 timeline, I wanted to just demonstrate a couple of things here to show you how to get your images to display correctly. Also wanted to show you how to make sure that your text displays in normal font rather than italics. These things really just make it easier to read for all of us to interact with the timeline. I do want to apologize for the way that Tiki-Toki can be finicky. Because we're all using the same account, it sometimes logs us off when a few of us are trying to use it at the same time. So I apologize for that. I know it's a bit of a headache. It's one of the reasons I ask you to do all your work in a document before copying and pasting it up to the timeline here on Tiki-Toki, among others. So that's one of those reasons. Something I want to point out, though, as we're moving from Unit 1 to Unit 2, do remember to address historical significance in specific terms in your timeline entries on historical topics. That's kind of the most important part. It's not kind of, it is the most important part of this assignment, because that's where you get to add your interpretation of the event or the person or the theme that you've chosen to add to the timeline. That's where you get to be a historian and say, here's what I think and why I added this here, because it's important to understand New Mexico history in these specific ways. I did want to point out too, though, that just because something was the first, that doesn't necessarily make it significant. Just because it's the oldest doesn't make it significant either. Santa Fe is the oldest colonial capital in the United States. Not the oldest colonial city, but the oldest colonial capital. But that in and of itself is not necessarily significant. You would have to go another step with that and explain why you think that's significant. So I'm not saying you have to completely avoid saying something was using first or oldest as significant. You have to explain why, though, because that's not in and of itself a reason that makes something significant. If you have any questions about that or want to talk about it more, please do get in contact with me. All right, a few things to look at here. When you're adding to the timeline, make sure that you change the year to the correct one. If you don't, it's not quite as important with our personal timeline entries here, although they are out of order. But if you don't do that, people will look at the timeline and they might think that you haven't claimed that topic because they don't see it in the place they're expecting to find it, if that makes sense. So do take care with that. Let's see. Let me use Taya's example, or Taya's entry here as an example, just to show you how to fix some of those things. So I'm going to click into hers. So she's put the entirety of her entry here in the intro box. When you do that, I'm going to click more here just to show you. When you do that, all of the text appears in italics and it's all kind of smashed together. So to address that, going back to the admin box here, what we're going to do is we're going to leave her name and her 6-word intro, because that's what you should put in the intro box in this case. Typically going forward, all you'll put here is your name, nothing else. So I'm going to cut everything else out of here, though, maybe, if my computer will let me highlight it all. Come on. Here we go. It's not wanting to work well with Screencastify. All right, so I'm just going to do Command or Control X and click Save. So you'll notice all that is gone. And she actually did this right, because she put the important information here in extra info. So it does show up here. You'll notice how different this is and how much easier it is to read. This is all in normal font rather than italics. And it has the spacing between paragraphs here that she had done in her document that she wrote this up on. So that's actually perfect. That's awesome. It just didn't need to have the rest of that information included in the basic info intro box. So again, don't put the bulk of your post into the intro box. Use extra info and this full text area, and then always click save early and often, because we might get kicked out as someone else logs in. So that's how to address that issue. I want to show you how to get an image to display correctly. So I went to media. This is the image that she has uploaded, because you'll notice it's just a box here. It's a blank box. The reason this time is that she used an Instagram photo. For some reason, Tiki-Toki will not accept Instagram, Pinterest, or Facebook photos, and I don't know why. It just doesn't. No matter what I've done, I can't get those to display here. So that's okay. You don't need to do anything different this first time around. But I did want to demonstrate. Let me find one that might have it. So as I scroll over, we're looking for one that has these white boxes, right? So the image didn't display correctly. Let's see Jen's entry here. And it could be, once again, that it just is that she's used an image that doesn't display like Instagram. So that one won't display here. Both of those are Instagram. Okay, I'm looking for a good example, not finding it. Let's see about Mary's. Someone that didn't use Instagram or Facebook. That's why that one didn't work. So hopefully everybody kind of has this down. I should have made note of which one. I noticed there were a couple of these that it was more about copying the wrong URL than about whether it was Facebook or Instagram. That one's a Google Doc, so that's why that has a little bit of a problem. Okay, here's a good example. All right, so Alyssa's entry here, she's used a Twitter photo. So she followed the example or the instructions that I gave of posting your photo to Twitter in order to get it to display. All I've done here is opened a new tab, and I'm pasting in the URL that she had added to Tiki-Toki. So let me move my head here a little bit. So what she's done is she's used the URL that was up here in the browser bar. That won't work for sharing images on Tiki-Toki. What you need to do is, this will work to get to the tweet, but not to share the image. So what you need to do is go put your cursor directly on the image itself, right click or control click if you're on a Mac, and then scroll down here to copy image address. If you're not using Google Chrome like I am, if you're using Safari or Edge or a different browser, it might say something slightly different than copy image address, but you're looking for the option that allows you to get the link, the URL, the address for the image itself. So I'm going to go back over to Tiki-Toki, and I'm going to paste that in and click Save. And you'll notice now it does display. So that's something to look out for. If you do a Google image search to find an image for the topics that you're choosing, the historical topics that you choose, you need to do the same thing. You can't use the URL up here in the browser bar. Instead, you put your cursor directly on the image, right click, and choose copy image address, and then paste that in. The other thing, going back over here to basic info, let me see. Let me click on Michael's. So do you remember the link box right here? That's where you'll paste the link or the URL for your outside source for all of the timeline assignments, units 2 through 6. I think those are the main things that I wanted to cover here. So again, that's how you get your images to display correctly here on Tiki-Toki. I will show you how to fix the date placement in just a moment. Do pay attention to that when you add your placeholders. Add placeholders as soon as you know what topic you want to do for the timeline, so that you can claim it. Because remember, you're not supposed to do a topic that's already been posted to the timeline. So I don't want anyone to do a bunch of work on a topic and then get back over here to Tiki-Toki and find that someone else has already posted on that topic. So that's why you need to come here first and add a placeholder. And all that means is you click create a new story, add the title, whatever your topic title is, and the date for that topic, and your name, and then click save. That's it. You've claimed it. And then you can come back and complete it as you complete the work on that ID step. All right, let's see. So I'm going to go back up here to Taya's entry. And so this one was placed at BC. um, I don't, I'm not going to presume to place this because I gave everyone the option of not sharing their birthday with us. If you didn't want to do that, you could just use today's date. So that's what I'm going to do. To do the dates, you use this section here. You click the little calendar icon, which will pop this up for a date picker. I'm going to make sure it says AD, and I'm going to change this to 2021. We're almost done with this year. It's December 29th. So something to point out here, sometimes you won't have a specific day. If you're doing a theme, for example, you might just have a year. You won't have the specific month and date. Even if that's the case, you need to just kind of randomly choose one within that year. You have to click a date on this calendar in order, and then click confirm in order for the date to take. So see, now it's changed. I'm going to click save, and her entry is now at the end of the timeline on today's date. I'll go ahead and do that with these other two as well. You don't have to watch me do it, but really do pay attention to where you're placing your entries so that other people will be able to see that you have claimed that topic. Pay close attention to the dates. Last here, something about choosing dates. I didn't give you specific guidelines about how to do that. You'll notice I said sometimes you will just have kind of a general, you'll know the year, but you have to kind of randomly pick a day and a month to get it to work with Tiki-Toki. If you're doing a person, you could choose to start with their birthday. You could choose to place them on the timeline during the years that they were doing something important to New Mexico history. So, for example, I notice here with Diego de Vargas, Andrea has chosen 1680 to 1694. Those are not the years of his life. Those were years. 1680 was the Pueblo Revolt. 1692 through 94 was when he waged the Reconquest. Um, and so, again, the point here is that historians make choices about the way that we frame history, the way that we frame the story, the dates that we choose to use in telling the story. That's something you have to choose. That's something you have to think about as you complete this assignment. And that's a way of thinking, again, like a historian. You're adding your interpretations. You're also thinking about, how did I frame this? Did I decide to frame this with the person's birth to death years, or with the years in which they were doing something that seemed to be significant, the reason that I chose them in the first place? All right. That's all I'll say here. I hope you're having a good Wednesday. I had to look at my watch to see what day it was. And I look forward to continuing our work here.